Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Coffee and Headlines. Here we are, ready to celebrate Mexican independence. Today is September 15, and all kinds of celebrations are going to start shortly and will continue until tomorrow. Today, of course, it is a pleasure to welcome you here at Coffee and Headlines, our morning get together live on Facebook and available online later on in both Facebook and YouTube, for you to enjoy, for you to connect with one another, for you to connect with our culture, our city, our way of life by looking at news, headlines, and your comments from wherever you are. Some of you are here living in Puerto Vallarta. Some of you are elsewhere with a warm place in your heart for Puerto Vallarta. But we get together. We get together and we try to combine the best information we can get a hold of so we can have an awesome life here in town and connecting with one another, of course. So today is going to be just like any other day. We are going to have our news, of which we have some fun and snarky ones. And then we are going to take a last look, at least this week, at independence in terms of what happened, what was happening in the world when Mexico finally decides to go on independence. And we're going to take a look at your comments as usual. So, as we always say, if you are new to the broadcast and would like to say hello, please let us know by writing the word new in your comment, and we'll be so very happy to give you a nice little welcome. If you have something truly important that you wish to share that you don't want us to miss, it helps a great deal if you add a capital letter Q at the beginning of your comment. So let's go for it. Well, yesterday was a beautiful day for a Charro parade here in Puerto Vallarta. And if you have been paying any attention to social media, you will find that just about everybody has published beautiful photos and video of, excuse me, the celebration. I lifted this short 1-minute video from the official channel of Puerto Vallarta so that you could get a sense as to what went on. A lot of people gathered on the streets to watch local teams of charros do their thing so that they could be appreciated by the public that lined up to watch them do their things. I actually went into town. I rode a city bus that had imaginary air conditioning. Well, it was an air conditioning of the mind, I think. And unfortunately, I missed the parade because I had things to do elsewhere in the neighborhood. But it was so funny to walk around Emiliano Zapata and the whole, well, some of the main roads smelled of horse doo-doo because obviously the horses had been waiting to do their thing. But it was a beautiful sight. I'm sorry that I missed it. Look at how young that kid is doing the rope tricks that are so common in as part of what goes on with the charros. So whenever you hear of a charreria or an event where charros are doing their thing, this is what they do. There's a series of, where am I? Here I am. There's a series of tricks and skills that need to be proven so that the different teams can compete against one another. And that's what went on yesterday. Everybody was very happy to attend. Meet Mario Javier Figueroa Betancourt. I'm calling him, unofficially, I'm calling him Lord Colorblind because he was the general director of the Office of Governmental Image for the state of Nayarit until yesterday, when it became apparent that he is the dude that decided single-handedly to change the colors of the Mexican flags to the colors of the Morena party. Needless to say, he tendered his resignation. Or did they ask for the resignation? Well, we will never know. That was a loud blow. Anyhow, we've been talking about Nayarit and how they are reclaiming properties that were illegally sold to private interests in the past administration. And now we learn that the state's attorney's office has a new claim, having secured a condo project called Quinta San Miguel in Nuevo Vallarta. I hope none of you live in this building or in this project. It is 3 condo towers, out of which 2 have been sold and are currently occupied, each unit valued at 14 million pesos. So illegal paperwork has revealed that the piece of land where the project was built was sold to a construction company for 120 million pesos, which is much less than what it's worth. But the payment was never received by the government of Nayarit, not to mention that the government of Nayarit never intended to sell the property to begin with. And now it's been built, and there are people living in it. So what happens next? I have no idea, but I can guarantee you it's going to get very, very ugly. So local authorities are tickled pink, or maybe tickled green, white, and red, due to the presence of a lot of tourists here in Puerto Vallarta for the long Independence Day weekend, and with hotel occupancy of as much as 85%. So things are looking favorably for our city for this weekend. It's going to be crowded and fun and wonderful for people that came to Puerto Vallarta to enjoy the Grito de Independencia and all the other celebrations, but not so much so in the magic town, the Pueblo Mágico of Mazamitla. Earlier this week, we reported that all municipalities in the state of Jalisco had a green light to celebrate Mexican independence as far as security was concerned. However, an incident did take place during the week in Mazamitla that gave the town's mayor, Jorge Magaña, reasons to be concerned. So despite the fact that the very popular Pueblo Mágico has an occupancy of as much as 90%, the mayor has decided to cancel the celebrations there. The state government reproached the decision, given the fact that there is such a thing as a state security board, just as there is a health board. And the state security board reproached that the decision was taken unilaterally by the municipality. What had been going on in the past, I seem to recall that some cartel-related roadblocks had taken place near Mazamitla recently. So it makes sense that the mayor wishes to not take any chances. But I found it interesting to see that the mayor of Mazamitla and the state government did not see eye to eye in this decision, which makes me think, and this is just speculation on my part, of how Jalisco has had problems with security, and sometimes I get a sense that our governor tries to minimize those problems. And here is a mayor who was in the thick of it all, who took his own decision, and he said, no, the safety of people comes first, and this is what has happened. So it is unfortunate for those folks in Mazamitla, or folks that may have made reservations months in advance, to be there. Let's take a look at the weather forecast before we continue with our little history lesson of the day. Haha, haha. Okay, so now that we've raised the snark level of our weatherman, our weatherman simply says it's fucking summer. Okay, it's 26 degrees right now. Feels like 30. Humidity is at 92%, and our temperature in Fahrenheit degrees is 80%. Our weather forecast for today says rain until morning and starting again in the evening with a high of 31 and a low of 26. So if you're going to be out and about walking around the city, trying to capture the festivities and the fireworks with your camera, please make sure that you wear weather appropriate clothes and you bring some plastic bags along with you so that you can protect your electronics and valuables should it start to rain. Then tomorrow, Friday, rain and humidity throughout the day with a high of 31 and a low of 25. And on Saturday, rain and humidity through the day with a high of 32 and a low of 25. And now, class, it's time to have our little history lesson. Let me set this up so that we can take a look at some of the events that were happening around the world that somehow had an influence on the Mexican independence. And we are going to start with this image that shows you a timeline. Well, let me get out of the way for a second. Okay, class. There's a timeline here that goes from the 1500s all the way to Independence Day so that we can get a sense as to what went on in the world that could have influenced Mexico to decide and go independent. So as I said, we start in 1521. This is the year when Spain conquered what is now known as Mexico. They started in Tenochtitlan, or actually when the Aztec Empire fell, it was 1521. That's when the Spanish conquistadors arrived in Mexico City, and they claimed Mexico as their own. At the time, Mexico also included several southern U.S. states and much of Central America, and they decided to call it New Spain. But, of course, we can move forward almost 300 years to 4th of July, 1779. This is the date in which the American Declaration of Independence took place. July 4th, 1779. That is 21 plus 10, 31 years prior to the Mexican independence. So it may seem disconnected from Mexico that we make reference to the United States independence, but remember that, you know, there was no Larry King, there was no internet, so news took forever to travel back and forth. So believe it or not, the American Declaration of Independence of 1779 had an impact on our own independence, which took place in 1810. Now, even though news were slow, by 1808, news of the French Revolution had arrived in New Spain. The French Revolution went from 1787 to 1799. But think about this again. I mean, even today, an Atlantic crossing takes, what, a week to get from America to Europe? So imagine how long these news would take back in the 1800s. At this time, by 1808, the population here in New Spain was 60% indigenous people, 22% were the castas, or castes, or mixed lineage people that we discussed yesterday, and the small minority of people that were left were purebred people, Spanish people, but they were the ones that were in power. And as we explained yesterday, the Spanish caste system was a societal structure that placed worth in one's heritage and skin color, determining the types of jobs one could have and what one could own. White Europeans were, of course, at the top of the food chain, and black slaves were at the bottom. So that is News Revolution of 1808. As of 1809, the following year, conspiracies to rebel against the Spaniards had begun. Prior to independence, many rebels have been identified and captured and executed by the Spanish government. So they knew something was going on. At this time in history, ironically, both the United States, the newly formed United States, and France supported the Mexican War for Independence. And it's ironic because France later would try to invade Mexico, and we got into a beef with the United States, but that is a whole other story. And of course, let us not forget that both the American Revolution of 1776 and the French Revolution of 1789 have been linked to the Enlightenment that was taking place all over Europe. And if you remember your history class from high school, the Age of the Enlightenment was this huge movement that affected our way of life, our way of thought, our politics, our art, so many things. And these things did not go unaccounted for in the Americas. Now, moving right along, at the center of all these conspiracies was this gal, this amazing lady called Josefa Ortiz de Dominguez. She was an insurgent and supporter of the Mexican War of Independence. But it gets tricky. Her husband, Miguel Dominguez, was the corregidor or mayor of the city of Querétaro. So he was one of the Spanish good guys, and she was a rebel. Think Star Wars for a second. She used to organize literary gatherings at her home, and these gatherings were attended by Miguel Allende, Juan Aldama, and Miguel Hidalgo, which were some of the key protagonists of the War of Independence. And doing some Google searches, if you figure out when some of our independence heroes were born, and you do some basic math as to comparing the year in which they were born and the year in which the independence took place, they were all very young. Well, maybe the priest, Miguel Hidalgo, was not so much, but all these generals, all these defenders of the Republic of Mexico were in their 20s. They were kids. So these meetings that Josefa Ortiz de Dominguez used to have that were disguised as literary gatherings became the official location of the revolutionary conspiracy, and much of the planning took place there. However, the shit hit the fan on September 13 when the conspirators were betrayed by a supporter who informed the Spanish colonial authorities about rebel activities in Querétaro, which is where Doña Josefa's husband was in charge. And the colonial authorities were unaware of Dominguez's wife's allegiance. So they asked the corregidor, they asked the mayor to go to the town and conduct a search and apprehend the rebel leaders, who would have, of course, included his own wife. So he imprisoned his wife, but in her own room, to prevent her from exchanging more information with fellow conspirators. Hidalgo, who was the priest that eventually led the independence, well, not eventually, just a few days later, he had originally planned for the Mexican independence movement to rise in December the 8th. But given the fact that they were all busted, he was forced to change the date to September 16, or tomorrow. So, with knowledge of a warrant for his arrest, a Roman Catholic priest by the name of Miguel Hidalgo led the War for Independence. On September 15, 1810, he rang the bells of his church in the town of Dolores in the state of Hidalgo. Of course, this happened at 11 p.m., and he gathered all the people in his town to think of the next movement or what was going to happen. Parenthetically, he did not ring the bell. Historians have confirmed that the bell was rung by the bell guy, who was Jose Galvan, who nobody knows, and there are no streets named after him. He was just the bell ringer of the parish, but that's a different story altogether. Anyhow, a few hours later, actually, in the early hours of September 16, 1810, is when Hidalgo calls his congregation to rally and revolt against Spanish rule. He gave a powerful speech, which is known as El Grito de Dolores, or the Dolores Cry, which ended with the words Viva Mexico and Viva la Independencia. And this was the original grito, or the original cry, that we celebrate to this day. And this is the reason why it is a 2-day celebration. It starts on September 15. We have the official shindig late at night on September 15, and then it continues to September 16. And through the passing of time, because nobody is really quite sure of what the speech that Hidalgo gave contained, we know that he said Viva Mexico and Viva la Independencia. Through the passing of time, Mexican presidents and governors and mayors have added their own share of vivas to their own speech, to their own enactment. And many of these are commented by the newspapers the day after. So tomorrow we will be commenting on whether President Lopez Obrador said a viva for this person or that person. And sometimes they will also, for example, President Lopez Obrador is bound to do a viva for liberty in Cuba. I'm just making this up, but we like to comment on who the president and the governors and the mayors cheer for, and we'll be curious about that today. It's what we do. What can I tell you? Let's see what is next. On July 30th of the following year, 1811, Miguel Hidalgo is executed. Who executes a priest, for crying out loud? But many other brave men and women carried on the fight for Mexican independence, which actually went on for 11 years. On the 27th of September of 1821, the Mexican Independence War ended, lasting 11 years. And after it was over, the first Mexican empire was formed, a constitutional monarchy with Agustín de Iturbide as monarch of Mexico, not president, monarch. But there were questions about the legality of the monarchy, and ultimately this only lasted for 2 years. The monarchy was dissolved, and the first presidential election was held 2 years after the fact. However, once the Mexican independence was over, Agustín de Iturbide, one of the first things he did as Emperor of Mexico, he commissioned a tailor by the name of José Magdaleno Ocampo, who lived in the state of Guerrero, to produce the first Mexican flag with the green, white, and red stripes. The symbol in the middle has evolved through the years, but the original design has remained pretty much the same since then. But again, Iturbide was bound to be an emperor for only 2 years. I don't know that we wanted an empire. So Guadalupe Victoria became the first elected president of Mexico in 1824. As president, he established diplomatic relations with the United States, the United Kingdom, the Federal Republic of Central America, and Gran Colombia, as it was known at the time. He also founded the National Museum. He promoted education and ratified the border with the United States of America. But things were far from smooth. In fact, Guadalupe Victoria was the only president to complete his full term in more than 30 years of independent Mexico. He was followed by Vicente Guerrero, who was president after him, lasting less than a year. And then after Vicente Guerrero came José María Bocanegra, who followed and lasted less than a month. So it would take 30 years for Mexico to actually balance itself from the outcome of the Mexican independence. But of course, that is a different story altogether. We are going to focus only on the events that led to Mexican independence. There are two afterthoughts that I want to share with you. This is the original bell that was rung by Miguel Hidalgo's minion at his church in Dolores Hidalgo in 1810. In 1896, that bell was brought to the Palacio Nacional in Mexico City, and it hangs on top of the main balcony at the Palacio Nacional, where tonight our president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, will ring it as it is rung once a year to make his declaration of independence. Prior to this, independence celebrations used to take place at Chapultepec Park, not far from Chapultepec Castle. And last but not least, it is worth taking a look at New Spain. This is New Spain or Mexico at the beginning of the 19th century. As you can see, it includes a lot of the southern states of the United States. And although you cannot see it on the map, it also includes a fair amount of Central America. The end. And now, let's take a look at some of your comments. I hope you found this interesting. Let's see what we have today. Lots of good mornings as always, and how wonderful it is to see you all. Uh, uh, well, this is what I was talking about. Gary says, watch where you walk today. Souvenirs left behind from the Charro parade. I know. I didn't step on any, but I sure could smell them all over Emiliano Zapata yesterday. I think that's funny. Good morning from Las Vegas. Good morning from Cincinnati. I love it. You guys are everywhere, and we are all gathered here together. Isn't that amazing? I think it is amazing. Let's see what else we have. More good mornings, more good mornings. The Charro pictures are amazing. Yes, there are a bunch of really beautiful photographs out there. It is something beautiful to watch, without a doubt. Let's see what else. Glee took tons of photos. Good for you. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. Let's see. Uh, did I say Nuevo Vallarta? I didn't even notice. I was probably just reading the notes that I took. But yeah, I mean, the comments that I hear from friends of mine that are locals and they pay attention to these things is that, what's going on with the government of Nayarit. But, we don't get to have an opinion there. Let's see. Ba-da-ba-ba. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Ba-ba-bam. Will there be a quiz? No, I don't think we'll have a quiz. Spencer asks, now that he has resigned, dismissed so quickly for the flag color situation, has the official who is double dipping income-wise in two government positions been resolved? Nope. We have not seen any further comments on that situation. And Spencer is asking about our director of municipal tourism, Ludwig Estrada, who was reported to be receiving his salary from the city and receiving a pension from the state. So what is happening with that? We don't know. A lot of times these things get brought up and then they get not mentioned anymore, and with hopes that we will all forget about it. Let's see. Let me not forget to remind you that we have a get-together coming up this coming Thursday at Whiskey Kitchen from 6 to 8. Another meet and greet, Whiskey Kitchen Versailles. I will be making an event for this as soon as we finish today's broadcast. There's a question here. Does anyone ask the bus driver why the AC isn't on? I don't know, Chris, because I don't speak for anyone other than myself. I have thought about it at times. But, ultimately, here's my feeling on the whole thing. The bus driver, more often than not, is just a minion like you and I, and he's probably as frazzled as anybody else. And ultimately, he's just following orders. So would I bother, would I add stress to a bus driver about the air conditioning when my main concern, as far as the bus driver is concerned, is that he takes me from point A to point B safely? No, I wouldn't rattle his cage. But it is an interesting question. You'd think we should be able to. And I am sure that we'll keep talking about this so-called mandate to turn the air conditionings on. In fact, I hope we do. And I hope people keep pressuring, not the bus drivers. They're just following orders, but the company itself. I think we're done. Yes, I think we're done. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for being curious about the history of Mexico. I always end up learning new factoids whenever I do research on these things. So I thank you for making me curious. And have a good time tonight. Just be mindful of people around you. Remember, COVID is still around, even though it has diminished. You know where your level of comfort is. You know how to make wise decisions for yourself. So stay happy, stay cheerful. Viva Mexico, and I'll see you again tomorrow.